Okay, for the third and final video where I talk about the BSG presentations, I've got another team that both won their industry, had the top score in the industry, and also had the best presentation score. Again, it's not a perfect presentation. I'm going to point out to you some strengths and weaknesses. Notice that they don't have the name of their company here, which would be a better title than the just BSG. What I like about this slide is they tell you right up front how they did. And there are several things I like about the way they told the story. The first is they put the industry average as a line on the chart. How you benchmark yourself says a lot about how you finished. If you finished around average or below average, then probably your most important benchmark is the industry average. If you did much better than that, then still probably the industry average is a fair benchmark, but you're going to want to include some of your other competitors. So you can see that this team surged in year 14 and then was the top in profitability. And usually stock price follows profitability, so that's a pretty good metric. Notice that they included their other major competitors. So you would expect that they're going to talk about company B and company G throughout the presentation. Couple other things about the lines. Personally, I don't like this lime green color. If you use it, it's fine. I just don't personally care for it. I would never have my company be the lime green color. I would pick a better color. One thing about the later versions of PowerPoint, they tend to pick awful line colors, so don't be afraid to change the line colors. Um, Make sure once you set the color scheme, it's consistent throughout the presentation. So every chart I look at, blue should be the average, lime green should be me, company B should be red, and company G should be purple. This particular class, they didn't do a good job of giving their companies names. So that's why you just see B, C, G. Normally I would use the full name. A couple other things I like about this slide. You can see that they had a sharp downturn in year 16, and you might say, well, what happened in year 16? But if you look at the industry average, it took a big downturn. Every other competitor also came down. So what this says is there was an industry-wide reaction, probably exchange rate, I don't remember. But by seeing what the industry as a whole did, it can explain some of the inflection points. But notice here, when they moved from year 13 to year 14, that's where they really stepped up in profitability. And as a whole, the industry was stepping up, but they moved up above everybody else. One of the things when you look at these lines that you should be asking yourself is, these inflection points in the lines are what's interesting. So what did we do between here and here that took us from being just a little bit above the industry average to probably the industry leader? This is probably, like I say, an industry thing, but it's nice to know what it is. And then if I was company B, boy, we just utterly collapsed there in that round, and I'd want to know what was happening there. So inflection points in your performance charts point to significant events that should be asking you, why did that happen? So again, I like the way, so they told you how they did. Now they're quickly telling you how they expected to get there. They were going for market share. They were going to go cost leadership. And they were going to go for economies of scale. So they show you a couple of slides, and these get a little bit repetitive. How they did in market share, you can see in Europe, Africa, they were well above everybody else. Whether you include these little triangles and the like on your chart is up to you. I do like how they tended to make the colors different. I don't know that I would put this many lines on a chart. This chart is too busy. And I would like to see my lines be a little bit thicker than these are because they're a little bit hard to see. Sometimes, though, the charts are one thing, the slides are one thing, the commentary that goes with them can add a lot to it. So again, these get a little bit redundant. The way I would explain it is what you're looking for are regions that mirror what your performance was across the regions. And there are some interesting things. You can see they were kind of up and down here, and then they went up and they stayed up. So you're wondering, what did you do right here to move up and stay up? So they talked about how they maximize their cost leadership. What they didn't do now is they didn't show you how some of these things work. For example, they said that we wanted to make sure that we used our distribution route with the lowest cost. So they could show that by showing how their costs compared for warehousing and transportation in the various against various competition. They don't. They just say this is how we did it. So it would have been even better if they'd have built a chart in there that substantiated these things. They're making a big deal that they reduced their production cost. The options are important, but they don't have any proof that they really did minimize their production cost. If you think back to the slide in the previous example I showed you, the one that I said maybe had too much information, you could see the way they presented the information. You knew that they were building the cheapest shoe. And you also knew they were doing it with a relatively high number of models and SQ rating. So you could see how holistically they did a nice job of giving you a complete picture, not what they're doing here. Although at times in the other one it was too much information. Here they would have been better if they'd given a little bit more. They also talked about the rest of their strategy, but again, nothing in here to substantiate their words on their slide. So had they done a little more analysis and built a chart or something that would have substantiated that, for example, they feel like they did a good job of bidding the right amount for celebrity appeal. So how do they know that? So it would have been nice if they would have put some things in there to substantiate some of these claims. Here they're talking about how they did a good job of doing the integration strategy, that they figured out that the superior materials were underused. And so they went into the superior materials and built their shoes using superior materials, which turned out to be cheaper than the standard materials. This was, in fact, one of their strengths that drove their production costs down, as they were very good at building a cheap shoe. And they're substantiating that by saying, look what we did with the materials. That was an important part of our strategy. Here they're talking about the responsiveness and how they watched what happened in the private label industry. What they did is they built a lot of capacity, and as far as their plans, and got to the point where they could step into the private label market. And what was happening is infrequently competitors would step into the private label market and they would do pretty well because a lot of people had left it. And they decided what we need to do is we just need to own the private label market. And you can see what they did to their competitors. Remember, B and G were the two that were close to them in profits. And they just went in and they took it away. And they were able to figure out, based on the bids and who got bids, how much, well, actually, this is not their profit in the private label. This is just their total profit. And they said, we are going to make sure that nobody can make much money in the private label because we're going to go in there and we're going to take it. And they had such economies of scale due to the large factories, they could bid a cheaper price than a lot of their competitors and yet still make a very nice return on selling in the private label market. This is not a great wrap up because it's fairly generic. Here they could say they said plan to build a plant in Latin America where production cost is low. What year, what size would be good piece of information to act there. Continue scanning competitors. That's a little ambiguous. Make sure our competitors stay out of private label market. Buy. So their future plan was not part of the strength. Again, I'm picking these presentations apart and you don't have the benefit of the verbiage. I want you to see how they work through mentally and what their charts, what their slides look like, because those are some things that will help you out. I am available to consult with you as you put your presentations together. This is a very important part of your course. This is your capstone MBA experience. So I look forward to the presentations. Take care.